Alright guys, today I'll be reviewing Ride of Steel at Six Flags Darien Lake. This is the first ever Intamin hypercoaster, and between the lack of heart lining and just the bizarre layout, you can definitely tell that it's the first hypercoaster by Intamin, but it's still a good ride, and I'll explain why in this review. So let's start off with the first impression, and this is the park. You see this anywhere in the park, you see this driving up, it just has a presence. It has the original Superman colors, because this was originally Superman Ride of Steel, but now it's just Ride of Steel, or Ross for short, which is what I'm going to call it the rest of the video, because it's easier. This ride is in the back left corner of the park. It's pretty much impossible to miss. You walk under Predator, and it's a straight pathway to it. There's nothing else there. I wish they would put like a flat ride back there, maybe a Nebula's or something. I don't know, something else, but anyways, you're going to notice that there's lockers and there's bins outside of the ride. And you can either choose to put your loose articles in the bins where anyone can snatch them, which no one has, or you can pay for a locker, so put them in the bins. Because this has one of the worst policies I've ever seen, where basically anything you bring in the queue line, you have to ride with. So phone, hat, keys, whatever it is, if you bring it in the queue line, you're forced to ride with it or leave. And I mean, they're not going to kick you off for pulling your phone out on the ride or keys. Like, it's annoying, because I can't tell you how many times this year I have just had someone filming a video, like, with their hands shaking in front of me and, like, genuinely being worried about getting hit with glass. Like, it's so annoying. I hate this policy, because it basically just invites people to bring their phones in line and then take them out on the ride. It's annoying, but anyways, the queue line is a cattle pen. Absolutely nothing to look at in here except the ride itself. Once you get into the station, there's really no difference. These ops are not great. I'm sorry. They're a little better than last year. I'll give them that, but they're still not efficient. They're kind of joking around most of the time. Yeah, this should be less than 2-minute ops for sure. Probably sub 130 on average, but it definitely takes over 3 minutes on average, which is very annoying, especially given that not only does it just run one train, it has to run one train because of like block zones and the fact that they don't even have a second train. And speaking of these trains, these are some of the best trains in the game. It's the Intamin T-bar, no shin guards, just the T-bar and a seatbelt. Now, they do staple most of the time, but if you can get some room, these are phenomenal restraints. Row preference, I would personally go row 1 or row 2. Honestly, row 2 might be better, because I feel like you get a little extra push. I don't know why. And also, it's a much shorter wait than row 1. It's amazing. Definitely take advantage of row 2 if you're like low on time or you just want to get as many rides as possible. But it's also worth trying the back once, because this ride does have a pretty good drop, which I'll get into in a sec. So you start off, you take a turn to the left. This isn't really any sort of fancy pre-lift. It's just a turn to the left. Then you start up the lift hill. It takes a while, but it's not super slow. It's not nitro slow. And then, of course, you're going to crest over the lift hill and go down the first drop. Now, this is a surprisingly good first drop. It only has an angle of descent of 65 degrees, but you know what? It still pops you out of your seat in those back rows. And especially if you look backwards during the drop, I do this all the time. If I'm in the back row, just look behind you, and it actually gives you a stomach drop sensation, or butterflies, whatever you like to call it, which I rarely get on coasters, which is definitely a plus to the back row, but absolutely everything else is better in the front. You're going to hit a low to the ground turn going to the left. No positive G's here, but you do feel that speed because it's right next to the ground. You can actually like grab the grass if you try. I personally wouldn't, but if you want to, go ahead, I guess. I don't know. I definitely wouldn't recommend it, but this is a very fun turn. You really feel the speed if you're in the front rows. And then you're going to start up probably the most disappointing part of the ride. It's the first camelback. This, no matter if it's 40 degrees or 90 degrees, you'll barely get anything on this thing. And it really feels like you could valley on this hill. It's very weak. It's completely different from any other like modern Intamin giant camelback. So after that, you're gonna drop down. You're gonna actually have this step up into the double helix, which actually gives a great pop of airtime in the front. Probably the most underrated part of the ride. And then you go through the double helix, which provides no real forces, but again, gives you a sense of speed, the wind in your face, and it's sustained. Not really any laterals either, just, again, it's a bizarre layout, and it's gonna get even weirder in a second, because it's the infamous straight track. It's the part everyone loves to make fun of, especially on America's version, but this was the original, so it kind of makes sense because it's over water. But still, like, they could have done so much here. They could have had a speed hill. They could have had a Mosasaurus roll. I mean, imagine that. But the straight section isn't awful. I mean, again, if you're in the front, you'll feel good speed here. That's really the main pro of this ride, is how much speed you feel because of how low it is. But anyways, after the straight section, you'll hit definitely the best part of the ride, and that is this ejector camelback. It's honestly almost on par with like a weaker RMC ejector hill. I mean, it's definitely nothing on Wildcat's Revenge or the triple camelbacks on Twisted Timbers or that one random hill on Steel Vengeance in the second half. Like, no, it's not that. But it's a solid hill. It definitely chucks you up. It's very good ejector airtime. And yeah, it's definitely better in the front, which I know a lot of people disagree with from what I've heard. But yeah, it's better in the front. Trust me. Like, everything on this ride's better in the front. After this, you're going to go through another double helix, this time going up. So no pop of airtime going into it, but you do get a little pop of airtime coming out of it. It's such a dud. I mean, it just kills the pacing. I mean, you had an excellent moment of ejector airtime right before it, and you just go ahead and ruin it with such a slow section. It really feels like you're doing absolutely nothing here. You don't even feel the sense of speed at this point because of how much speed you've lost. But that's okay, because Ride of Steel has a decent finale. So it's basically an S hill into two straight hills. These are all very small. The S hill gives okay airtime, but mainly it gives good laterals, which I really like. And then the last two hills decrease in strength, but the second one is still pretty powerful, I would say. It's like Flowjector, more bordering on floater, I would say. So yeah, and then you're going to come to a very harsh stop. This ride tracks very bizarrely. It feels butter smooth in any section that's fast, but when you're going around those helixes especially, it has a huge rattle, and it's not bad. It doesn't take away, especially since you're not really doing anything during this time, but yeah, it's very bizarre. If you're sensitive to that, maybe it would be an issue. So yeah, definitely look out for that. So overall, this is a very bizarre coaster, one of the weirdest hyper coasters like out there, really. But it was the original Intamin Hyper, so gotta give them a little slack for that. So overall, for Ride of Steel's final score, I'm gonna give it a 870 out of 1,000, and I think that's fair for Ross because it was the first. It does a lot of things right. All right, I'm stumbling at this point, so I should probably get off, but yeah, it does a lot of things right. It's got great airtime in some moments. It's got laterals. It's got great pacing in some points. Great sense of speed. But yeah, it's a disaster in other points. It's still a good hyper coaster. It's still second best in Darien Lake. So that's why it still gets an 870. But it could definitely use a little work. So that's my review of Ride of Steel at Darien Lake. Let me know what you guys think of this down in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.